Jelelle Awen. This is day 28 of 33. Almost done. And this is Gabriel.
Hello.
Who's joining me again. And I meant to look at which day you joined me before, but I totally forgot.
I can't remember. I don't know.
I'll link to it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
And we talked about that your demons are your angels unheard in the last video.
Right.
So I really recommend listening to that. I thought that was a really beautiful one.
Yeah.
Gabriel read some of his writing. And then we talked about, basically, it's shadow work. If you want to think about it another way.
Right.
So I wanted to have you come back and talk about specifically your process with the inner masculine, healing the inner masculine, connection with Divine Mother, Divine Father, to heal the inner masculine. What is that even? What is a healthy masculine? What does that even mean in a world of such wounded masculine? And working with your inner teenager.
Right.
That's where I thought we would go today.
That's a lot.
Yes.
That's a lot.
Wherever you want to start.
Wow. Where do I want to start? I think I'd like to start first about my relationship to the masculine, or whatever my prior relationship to the masculine was. This life wounding. I've always had something about what is masculinity growing up. What does that mean? Because I feel like I grew up I was a sensitive boy, definitely a mama's boy in most regards, and sort of leaned more into her, but then also I had a deep respect, a part of me had a deep respect and care for my father. I do have a deep respect and care for my father. And yet there was something in him that was there was a deep rage inside of him, there was depression. And so that came out in a lot of intense reactions from himself onto me, my sister, even my mom, in life in general. It was just like, and so as a very sensitive boy, it was just sort of like, I was very afraid of him. Right. And afraid of masculinity. Like, what is this masculinity? Was just such this...
masculinity was rage, basically.
It was rage, it was being strong. It was also a mental thing, too. My dad wasn't, super, into education in that sort of way, but his was more rage, emotion. And then I had a stepfather, too, who was very intellectual. So then you have the mental intellect going in there. So the masculinity was about being smart and pissed off somewhere in there.
And disdainful of women.
And then definitely the relationship
like an
to
undercurrent.
Women. Right. Yeah. So there was a sense of a deep disdain, anger toward women, and sort of that they needed to be like this or like that. Emotionality was just like, I can't handle that. In terms of being vulnerable, it was just no templating around that. So it was sort of an early childhood, and going to the teenager, that was a time where it was a sort of a deep place of who am I as a boy going into a man. So you talked yesterday with Kalena about the kind of initiation stage.
Yes.
And this is like, man, when you're 12 or 13 years old as a boy, there's nothing more confusing than like, what the F am I as a man? What does that mean? I have this father, that father kind of to template off of, and my entertainers is like, I don't really dig either one of those two in the way they're expressing outwardly.
Right.
And so I always found myself more connected to the feminine. I had a lot of female friends. But then also we try to connect with my male friends in this more like male way. What did that mean? It meant sports and drinking, and then it was about politics, and so it became very mental. So there was a lot of just wounding. That male masculine wounding just kind of stayed with me in my teenage years. And then so it was either about rebelling against that or conforming into it, and I can feel myself being sort of in between. And so there was a lot of just confusion inside me about what that was. And I can feel in my heart that I wanted to be a bit more gentle, in one way, but then I wanted to be more honest. I had something about I had a hard time being vulnerable, about outing my truth. Because with my father, it would come out as rage and anger sometimes. It would be pent up and then...
Right.
So then there was a more feminine side of me that was a bit afraid of that. So then it would suppress that. So there's a lot of push-pull going on as to what it was to be really, truly masculine. I know what I didn't want it to be. I didn't want to feel rageful and angry at the world. And I didn't want to just rationalize everything away. Magic sort of left my space for a while, you know. And then I think when I started doing some drugs in college, that sort of popped open the whole mind thing, and I got beyond mind in those experiences. And then really connected to something way more magical. It wasn't really so much, I mean, I guess it would be divine feminine in some ways. When we got together, there was a different frequency of feminine and what that meant, and being honest with our feelings. And without it kind of coming out in sort of anger, that was just, you know, when we met, there was a lot of rage inside me. So that was a big piece. And then when we got together, there's something that kind of softened around that in our relationship together, in your femininity. And so I became really connected to that. And then Rihanna was born, and then it kind of, something came over me again about dutiful father. Right. And that was a whole other masculine piece about being a good dad and being a provider. And so something that was opening up in me kind of closed back up in a 3D way and went back into more of this like rational, reasonable, do the job. And then that kind of capped something inside me.
As it was meant to.
Right, exactly. And then it just built up over time, and you know, finally it came to a point where I think this masculine piece is when it kind of got connected with Jelelle again, and she would be talking to me about your EBE work, your personal, you know, emotional work that she was doing, and I could feel a reconnection to that. Like, wow, what is that all about? Who am I? What is this all about?
You were always fascinated by parts and identifying different parts.
Right. And I could feel, when you were talking yesterday with Kalena about being, you know, 30-something years old, but still feeling 14 or 15, that was exactly how I felt. Even when I was 35 years old, it's like, why do I still feel like I'm 14 years old? Especially around family. When I get around family, I felt young. Right. And I'm trying to, this young part of me, this young boy is trying to prop himself up. And I've got this teaching career, and I've got a daughter, and I've got this pension, and you know, so I've got all the things that I'm doing, quote, right as a man, but yet something's still not translating for me in my soul. And so it became a kind of a quest in some way to be like, what is masculinity? I don't even get it. I don't understand it.
It's not dissimilar to what Kalena and I were talking about. The feminine is the absence of the wounded masculine. It's the healing of the wounded masculine frequencies so that the feminine can arise. And it seems to me it's the same with the masculine. Yeah. So not making masculine bad, but just saying that it has wounded frequencies and it has healthy frequencies.
Yes. Yeah. When I first started with, well, before it was a different name, but with the healing work, Briva, you know, there was this connection to the divine feminine, which is what that original work was about, which is what this has always been about. And so it was getting in touch with a feminine frequency that I could feel in... Right
away you could feel her.
Yeah.
It was, I think, how sensitive and artistic you are. Your inner feminine was preserved somehow. Yeah. So you could connect with this divine feminine frequency as well. Right.
I remember there was in one meditation I had, or when I was doing some journaling, it was like she was in this crystal ball kind of feeling. Yeah. And she was preserved. It was almost like
they're often in the inner feminine is usually in a bell jar, or often a tower, or in a crystal ball. It's preserved.
Right. And especially as a man, you don't actually, you put it away because it's not. In the man in the patriarchal world, it's not acceptable to be out in the sort of more feminine, sensitive frequency. So as you're trying to be this image or this thing of man that you've come to learn through your conditioning and enculturation that this is man. This is not good. I'm going to put that over here because that's too delicate, and it would be really felt like it would be trampled on in some ways.
Yeah.
And so my inner feminine was a bit sort of, and she was kind of like, I can't be out because it's too dangerous or something, it was unsafe. So the healing work actually provided a safe space for that to arise, only through feeling my wounded masculine through my inner teenager at the time.
I want to say though that I do feel that often maybe it's not the most vulnerable expression of feminine, it's more like a hurt frequency of feminine, that a lot of men lead with that actually. And let's say in a relationship, I think and Carl Jung was really onto this, that he felt like it was actually in most relationships, the masculine in the woman, he called the animus, and the anima in the man, that would clash with each other. That would be in a kind of codependent hookup together. So the masculine would dominate the feminine in the man. And when I first read that, and that was what I had seen over and over again and experienced myself as well.
Right.
I tended to lead with more hurt and more, I hope more vulnerability, which is hurt when it heals. But I've seen this, so we have this thing like men are so impenetrable or something, when actually in a lot of cases I think they're leading with more vulnerability. It's just coming out as hurt.
Right.
Do you agree?
I agree. Yeah. And even the rage is covering that up too.
Oh, totally.
It's covering up the hurt. So you've got this sort of anger and control out here that's trying to protect the hurt that lies right underneath, and that hurt is you're right, it feels like that inner feminine piece.
And the woman we can be actually very mental, our masculine aspects, and very much on the side of the man. So we think we're feeling when we're actually analyzing hugely, and we're all up on the man's side. Really, this was parts of me, all up on the man's side, analyzing, and the man is totally hurt. Because that's not being felt, and somehow he knows it. So there's a lot of mixed dynamics that go on here. When you start feeling parts and you kind of let go of the gender of the body and realize there's masculine and feminine, wounded and healthy parts in all of us.
Right.
It's very illuminating.
Yeah, and I think for the man too, because of the more externalized expression of it, because we are men with genitals, with in our gender expression in our bodies, it seems to be inhabited. It needs to be inhabited more somehow. It's really held on to quite profoundly, and I can feel that in women too, as a way to match that or something. And so
that's our templating for both sides.
Right.
Is wounded masculine, not the feminine for either side. So men don't feel how to embrace their inner feminine.
Right.
And women don't either.
Right.
So
you made a good point one time, we were talking about this, where men growing up in that teenage phase are actually meant to, in a way, push away from mom to find their own, feel their own sovereignty. So you've got your, in a way, pushing away from mom, which represents feminine.
They have to, because it was, the source. It was the source of you.
Right.
So it's so easy to get fused
and
codependent and not your own person.
Right. Yeah. But then you're being asked in a feminine offering. You're being asked then to go back into that from which you came, which you were trying to push away from. So then there's a big piece of like, wait a minute, I thought it was supposed to be like pushing away from the sovereignty. Now you're asking me to go back into surrender of something. So there becomes a bit of this. There is a confusion. There is something.
How did you reconcile that?
I think because for me personally, because of my natural connection to the feminine, some way in my soul, I connected with her immediately because I needed her to feel that.
The divine feminine,
the divine feminine, divine mother frequencies. Yeah. But then I think as that I started to heal some things through that. I could feel another part of me come up, though, in resistance to that, in a way. So, okay, I felt the Divine Mother. She's helping me heal some pieces. But then once that kind of comes up, then there's something else that goes, but wait a minute, I need to push away from her again. And I need to find Divine Masculine. And then it's like, but I felt myself grabbing onto old templating what masculine is. So then it's like, okay, wait a minute. So it is feels like a bumpy road. So I'm feeling divine feminine, connecting with her, with mother, helping then move into this more connectivity to divine father.
Right. I was just going to ask you, so where does because obviously the patriarchal God, the demiurge, what are other, just the Christian God, has been really so suppressive to our consciousness, and I don't feel offers a healthy template of masculine. It offers a patriarchal template. So you have to push against that too. You have to push that away, which is a huge process for all of us and our meta souls in whatever ways we've been devotional to that God or push that God away. So then where does the divine masculine, where does the divine father, what's a healthy, how does that come in?
That's been, it's kind of, for me, just been journaling in a way. It's almost like making up this masculine frequency. I can connect with Metatron as an example.
He has a lot of that.
I know that Yeshua has become more of this divine masculine in sort of almost a brotherhood sort of way, as opposed to a savior sort of piece. Yeshua represents this divine masculine groundedness about open heart, Christ consciousness, and relationship to the feminine.
Honoring.
And especially since this lifetime, I don't have any Christian conditioning, I don't have the relationship. So part of it is kind of, how do I connect with Yeshua when I don't have any but that's actually a good thing.
That's a good thing.
I have more of an open channel to this. And in some ways it just feels like, I don't know, let's just tap into what I would like divine masculine to feel like. What is it? So in trying to mentally figure out what divine masculine is, just open up to the feeling of what would it be like is what it wasn't. It wasn't about control. It's not about suppression. It's about open heart. It's about vulnerability. There's a bit of it's not contention, but there's a boundary. There's penetration. So then but then even in masculine, how do you penetrate, right? How do you penetrate with compassion and love is a big thing, because we're so used to just penetrating with a bit of a force and control. So then I feel like, Metatron, Yeshua, there's, and even Buddha in a way kind of has some sense around the mental around the sacred masculine.
And I feel like when you're saying these names, you're really naming frequencies of you.
Right.
As well, that you're, and also connecting with higher consciousness metasoul aspects that have access to these masculine frequencies from a higher dimensional. Sometimes they're, excuse me, quite asexual. So sometimes they're a template, sometimes not.
Right.
I think Surian energy offers a lot, because they're definitely higher dimensional, but it feels like they've been through a lot of the same journey that we have.
Yeah.
And that lion energy.
Right. I was just going to say with that, then there's also more of the reptilian, draconian energy that lies, that really feels like the wounded masculine has, in a way, there's a close connection somewhere between those two.
Absolutely.
And still feeling through where that came in. I know that Atlantis, there was something going on in there, but there's definitely something with reptilian, draconian piece that...
The reptilians influenced the cultures, what I've remembered about it.
Right.
And there was always a more hierarchical feeling to Atlantis. There was a hierarchy. There were high priests, and there were definitely those that were laborers.
Right.
So there were some things about Atlantis that people don't always take into consideration.
More wounded masculine.
In that way, it was almost destined to fall.
Yeah.
And I feel like our culture, in the same sense, is destined to fall because of the lack of balance, because of the dominance of the wounded masculine. That's what we're seeing in the Me Too movements and the sexual abuse finally coming out. It's like the feminine had to come together, I think, in order to surge up enough to move the wounded masculine out.
Right. Of themselves.
Of themselves,
right.
But culturally. So there's something very interesting going on collectively right now around this, around the wounded masculine.
Right. Definitely. And we've seen even in a president who has a whole treasure trove of wounded masculine that's right out there for the world to see. He doesn't actually hide it, which is in some ways, regardless of what you feel about him, it's just there it is, right in plain sight.
It plays an important role, it feels like, in what's coming, in collapsing the whole thing.
Right.
We have a lot of death and rebirth coming. So with that, with the collective going through so much around gender, it feels to me like this is even more reason to take it inward.
Mm-hmm.
To feel it inside. Oh, one thing I want to say too is this is a pattern that I've noticed. I work only with women, but when they talk, women who are in partnerships, and it seems like to be more and more common that the woman is awakening and the man is not, or the man just flat out says, part of him says, I'm not going to change, or I'll support you, but I'm not going to awaken with you, and I'm not interested in what you're doing. What do you feel what's that dynamic going on for them? I mean, I'm asking you to be general. But.
Right, yeah. And my only intuition is, because I was one, before my awakening happened through, really it felt like the drugs helped to pop something into me mentally. Mm-hmm. So if a man is feeling not to awaken and not to go on this path, there's something in him that there's a fear of facing something. Of awakening to something inside of himself, that somewhere in him he knows that it's kind of confronting something inside of himself.
And they'll even say they still love the woman, but they're not letting the divine feminine lead them into something new.
Right. Yeah. I wonder if there's a feeling of, of having a hard time where there's a surrender into something, and I think a part of the masculine feels like that submission. That I'd be submitting to something, and I'm not going to do that. There's a big piece of sovereignty that goes on, I think, around it, and I will choose when and where I will awaken, and you can't tell me.
Doesn't that go back to mom?
Yeah, I mean, big time.
Because that's what I feel like. I hear a part of the man saying, "No, mom, I'm not going to come with you."
Yeah.
And then there's this provider or a patriarchal part saying, "Well, I'll support you."
Right.
Which is not actually support if there's not resonance.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's something in the collective, in the more archetypal masculine feminine, where the feminine there's just so much there, and I think the masculine is overwhelmed by it and can't quite fathom it, and yet knows there's still something to look at. I think he knows intuitively that there's something that needs to be looked at and felt through, that I'm even going through myself personally, that can be a little bit hard to feel.
Not just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, right. It's a huge piece.
And if there hasn't been permission to feel,
right.
In the culture, in the templating, that's going to be very challenging.
Yeah.
There's more permission for women to feel.
Yeah. And it could be a gatekeeper thing that's just saying, no, I'm not. We're not going to awaken right now because there's a whole mess, quote unquote, back here.
Why then this pattern of, in these cases, the men wanting to hold on to these relationships? Rather than complete them, lead the completion of them.
That too, I think that still feels like a mom thing. It still feels like a need. Well, there's a need to feel. I think there's a codependency that goes on there. There's something that the woman provides the man, and that maybe could be a sense of there's a superior inferiority complex going on, in which there's an inferiority in him. That's then the woman's wanting to move and rise up, and so that's making him feel this particular inferiority and needs to feel superior. So we'll come up with this need to support.
Yes, it's patronizing.
Right.
It's like you go and figure out who you are,
right,
and I'll support you.
Right. So then there's a feeling of control there. There's a feeling of like, well, you can go ahead and do this, but I'm going to cap that by telling you that you can do this. I just feel like there's something.
But I'm not going to change.
Right. But I can't live without you. I need that. I need this dynamic to be in place for me to feel something that's a void inside of me. I don't have a sense of completeness inside of myself. You complete something in me, but in a very sticky way that I can't have access to myself. And in a way, it's like I haven't accessed my feminine. So I've projected that onto you. So I need you to be my placeholder.
Oh, they're living through too.
Right.
Part of them is resisting the awakening that the woman's going into, and then another part of them is living through it vicariously.
Yeah.
They need it to be around,
right,
but they can't claim it for themselves.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it feels like it's a really deep emotional. What's the word I want to use? It's has compassion to it, but it is a mess. It's a big feeling mess that men are having to walk into, and it is very difficult to confront and to face, because I think there's a bit in the masculine collective history that we all as individuals need to face as men, I believe. And there's the way that the feminine was treated, how we were a part of that in our souls. That's the awakening. There's a disclosure piece there that we're having to confront and to take inside of ourselves.
And we talk about remorse rather than guilt.
Right.
So it's a genuine, heartfelt remorse that moves.
Right.
Guilt, somebody's paying.
Right.
There's some cost.
Yeah.
But to feel that remorse, I know Raphael has had moments of just deep remorse.
Right.
And then it moves, and it's like he's moving something for me and
Right.
all women, and you've had it too.
Right.
And for me, as we talk about masculine, feminine relationships, I honestly can't imagine being in one without parts work and without both partners engaging in it. Because as you're just getting some sense, as you take on maybe our framing or the way we see things, it, like you said, lovingly, it's a mess. Mm-hmm. And there's all kinds of hookups. Right. Father to daughter, daughter to father, mother to son, brother and sister, all kinds of different things.
And other metasoul pieces too.
And not having the ground of these parts and being able to go back to yourselves is so critical. Yeah. And speaking of that, I mean, how has your masculine shifted being in relationship with Kalena now?
Great question. I think there's more of a sense of feeling my own inner feminine, actually. It goes to my inner feminine to feel her, which I'm starting to reconnect with again on a different level. And it's pinging up against my own sense of vulnerability as well. So it's like where I need to, in order for this relationship to be blossoming and grow, there needs to be an inner sense of my own vulnerability. So I can't have that unless I'm in a relationship. With someone who really needs that. I need it, so it presses up against something inside myself. So I should say that there's a connection with my own king frequencies, and king is leading with vulnerability. So to me right now, it's about being vulnerable. It's about opening up my heart, about being honest, and then being in whatever that is, and that it's not nice and neat and packaged up, and every day isn't going to be the same as the next. And if they start being that way, then all of a sudden she's just like, wait a minute, time out. Things are too the same over a period of time. So I need her to sometimes help out, because I do have a part that can coast a bit in relationship. And so that helps to bring up, okay, what's going on inside me? I need to be feeling. And,
Kalena is a lot like me, and we have a lot going on multidimensionally and intuitively.
Right.
And so sometimes she's seeing all kinds of things, like about a metasoul connection between the two of you, and you're kind of like, wait a minute, I haven't even started down that yet.
Yeah. So there is a part that there's the masculine inside can feel a press in that a bit, so it does press upon the masculine to continue to be in a state of realness, in a state of vulnerability. And in that, there is the divine feminine is looking for the masculine to rise, to match, and to be in this king state. And the king isn't about out here, it's about being the king on the inside with your own parts.
Nice feel of writing coming on.
Yeah, that's been written a couple of times, but it feels to be continuing to talk about the inner kingdom within. So yeah, I've done some of that.
Wow, okay, time flew. Thank you, Gabriel.
You're welcome, thank you.
Yeah, good topic, very timely, and just going to be more so in the future. So thank you for joining us. I'll link to some writings you might want to take in as well. And see you later.
Hoorah!
Bye.